and I thought what better video than to blow it up with a tank. So we're going back to this amazing field of abandoned movie cars. And when I look back at it, it was quite amazing to walk through a field with Ramon from Cars rotting away and Professor X with his spy goggles and these amazing lowriders like the Snoop DeVille. But in the corner was a car that meant so much to me. Growing up, my dad had a 1977 Chrysler New Yorker. And the best way to describe that car is I think it's one of the coolest, most gangster looking cars. It was a super long car, which the grills on the front of that year on the 1977 Oldsmobile Cutlass also were the same. The grill went up the top and then basically creeped like a pair of hands over the hood of the car. I remember my dad having a 77 Chrysler New Yorker Burrum, and it was burgundy with a black vinyl roof, had a 440 V8, and basically when you sat in it, it was like sitting on a Chesterfield sofa. It was so comfortable, and it had that smell of like your granny's cupboard, but the smell that when you walked in a house that you knew you were home, if that made sense. I got in it as a child. I must have been maybe 10 years old, and I just remember going, oh my God, this is amazing. I could sit in the seat and I could feel like my dad was sat like in Bovington Tank Museum. It felt like it was so far away. The car got worse and worse, and it was rotten and rusty, and the English climate isn't good to American cars. They just rot away. And my dad basically broke the car up, and he sold the engine. It was worth £1 a cube back in England back in the day. So we got 440 English pounds, basically back in the late 90s, for this engine. And that money there took our whole family on a helicopter ride around New York for one of our vacations. So I'll always remember that a part of that car took us on one of the most special rides of my life. When I met my wife, I was lucky enough to take her to New York for our first sort of, trip away, and we did exactly that. We went on the helicopter ride around the Statue of Liberty. And when I saw this car in this field, it had all the signs. It had the pillarless windows, had the lengthy doors, it had the wraparound big C-pillar that flowed down like a boat, like a wave out the back, and this horrible long trunk that you could get 7 or 8 bodies in. And I looked at it and I was like, it looks like a 77 Chrysler New Yorker. I'm looking around it, but there were things that were wrong. It had these massive snouts. That the only way I can describe it is a 1979 Trans Am is not the prettiest of cars. It has like a wedge at the front, and you have 4 basic headlights that are recessed into the bonnet. These grills at the front were like recessed noses, a little bit like the Chrysler Imperial in Inspector Gadget, that kind of like look, if that makes sense. And these grills basically had holes in. And then when I looked at it, the windscreen was broken. But a normal windscreen that's broken will crack, delaminate and fold in. This was broken in quite a few places, but all stood still, and you could see the lamination bubbles between the glass. But it didn't look like normal glass, it looked quite thick. And as I looked around the car, it had these massive, all I can say is like RV tyres on it. Huge, whacking great tyres that were a lot bigger than like a normal American car tyre, which are probably a lot higher profile anyway. They were like this, like a truck tyre. And then you started looking around it, and I went to open the door, and it was like, and I could barely lift it open. And I noticed another special part. The driver's door glass was 2 inches thick. So the glass on the car was super thick. And then I looked around the car, and it was quite weird because all the door glass and the windshield glass was 2 inches thick. But I looked at the rear glass, and it was a curvature glass, and it was 3mm thick, like a normal piece of unlaminated glass from the 70s. But then when I sat in the back of the car, there was a Bakelite phone. There was all this like stuff, which obviously you can imagine being a presidential vehicle. And I turned around, and there it was, that 2-inch piece of glass that was actually inside of that glass, which basically this car was a safety device. It was a cocoon. But it really, really became apparent that this must have been something special when I opened the boot. So I opened the boot, and I found lots of the parts that were missing, the hubcaps that were originally on this car that said Imperial. So, okay, so this is obviously not a Chrysler New Yorker. This is the hierarchy version. This is the Chrysler Imperial LeBaron. So basically a very, very high standard of Chrysler New Yorker. And as I opened the boot, there was these 2 duct-in panels that looked like air conditioning tubes that went down and went underneath the car. And then they went up to a venting system that went inside the car, and one vent went right to the front of the car under the carpet and went to the back. This had basically a smoke system so that if inside the car caught on fire, it would recirculate the air to put oxygen inside the car and vice versa. So if there was a fire at the back, they could flick a switch and get air from the rear or from the front. And then when you open the bonnet, the air filter had a 1/2-inch steel plate over the top of the air filter, bolted to the top of the engine. All around the engine were these steel plates that were protecting it from basically bullet fire. When we jacked it up and finally got air into the tyres because they were flat as a pancake, we looked under the bonnet and there was 6-inch by 6-inch steel box section which was used to reinforce the front bumpers. Normally these bumpers would have a crumple zone. On this car they were full on chassis mounted steel girders, basically battering rams. So if you ever had to get through something, you know that front bumper would look after you. The radiator was protected with metal brackets so that it wouldn't be damaged in an impact, and a lot of these cars were replicas or movie replicas, shall I say. But this car seemed a little bit more than that. This looked like a presidential, bomb-proof, bulletproof car. After a quick phone call to Mr. Elo from London Motor Museum, he told me that this car was none other than the King of Iran's car. And in 1977, he escaped the Iranian Revolution with his family in this actual vehicle. And that is how special it is. He says if you run the VIN number in America or in Russia or anywhere in Europe, this VIN number comes back as a presidential vehicle and it hides all the details of who owns it. He said it was owned by the King of Iran. Elo has never told me anything that has not been the truth. He told me about the Snoop DeVille being Snoop Dogg's. He told me it was driven onto the MTV Music Awards, and there's a video out there if you want to go see it. And he told me this car was the King of Iran's. The main issue I had is I'd signed a deal with the British Army the week before because I had this car which owed me £5,000, and I thought what better video than to blow it up with a tank. And the idea I had, which is very Sam Hard, is that I thought it would be very, very cool for us to go to an army base and there'd be these tanks driving around, but we turn up in the Chrysler Imperial because I thought it'd be amazing to try and race this 1977 Chrysler Imperial armoured vehicle against an armoured vehicle of today. So we could have like a race to see what was faster, what was more agile, what was more effective. And then I thought what we could do is we could remove some of the Kevlar in the doors and the glass that was already damaged to maybe shoot it with bullets to also see how it stands up with today's equivalent of bulletproof material. But then I thought it would be amazing. I had this stupid idea. I said, how about me and Adam C and Scott Ratterosser are stood there and the tank turns up, yeah? And we have a go in the bulletproof car and we have a go on a motorbike, and then the guy turns up in a full-on tank, right? And we shoot the car with a gun and with a handgun, and then we shoot the car with a rifle, then we shoot it with a sniper rifle. And then the major of the British Army comes up and goes, how'd you fancy a go with a tank? And then we're all looking at each other going, yeah, I've always wanted to have a go in a tank, let's have a go in a tank! So we're all looking at each other, and then all you see is the guy in the tank walk back to the tank and goes, boom, and just blow the car up, you know? And we're all devastated and angry and all this sort of stuff. And we had another idea of throwing Mr. Ratterosser in it at the beginning as a bit of a joke to take him round, and then we blow it up and then he'd still be in the boot afterwards. All these silly ideas. But then I got a phone call from Elo and he went, hey mate, don't do anything stupid with that car. It is a piece of, you know, the history of that country, and don't do anything silly because to the right person that is worth a lot of money. And I said, well, I was going to blow it up a tank and I shan't now. So we went back and we put some fuel in it, dribbled it down the carburetor. And it was funny, it was a company called Top Don, who were like basically sell electronics for repairing vehicles like jump packs. And they sent me, lovely people, a little tiny jump pack, which is basically designed for starting up to 2-litre vehicles in a state of emergency when your wife's car doesn't start because I left the lights on. And basically we thought, do you know what better test for this little tiny jump pack to try and start this amazing bulletproof car. 440 cubic inch V8 American muscle that hasn't been started in 10 years. So I put the jump pack on it and I dribbled a bit of fuel in. Flames poured out like every single nightmare of any mechanic that's trying to start a piece of junk. And then finally, I dribbled a bit more fuel in and it fired up. Right, it fired right up. We checked the oils first, guys. Don't get too angry with me. And we started it all up, and it had no transmission dipstick, so we couldn't check the transmission oil, basically. So I poured a litre of oil ATF down a dipstick tube just to make sure it started up. And I stopped pouring the fuel in the carb and it carried on running. It stunk of stagnant fuel, but it carried on running on the original fuel pump and the original tank in the car, which never happens. I didn't have to clean the points. I didn't have to do anything whatsoever. And then I jumped in it and I went click into drive. Started pulling forward. It was like the stars had aligned. We got it out, we poured some petrol in the tyres and blew the tyres onto the rims. We put the rims back on. I put loads more ATF, automatic transmission fluid, in the gearbox, got it to change nice and smoothly, and then we took it out for a drive. And it was quite literally amazing. Until I caught fire to the King of Iran's car on our first road test. We pulled over, open his smoke pot bellowing everywhere, trying to flick the old oxygen switches, which will save the participants in the back, pop the bonnet, and the air filter that's in it is fully on fire, like flames over. I pick it up and throw it out of the way. It was quite an eventful road trip, but if you're the King of Iran or the King of Iran's son and you want to buy a car, give me a shout. And you know what? This was the story of how I set fire to the King of Iran's car just after forgetting that I was going to blow it into a million pieces.
Over the last 4 years, we've partnered with Glossit to show off some of their amazing detailing products, give you some great deals, and show how much they can transform any car. But did you know that Glossit University is also one of the most amazing online resources for education, mentorship, and coaching for whatever your business is in the detailing space? Whether you do paint correction, ceramic coating, PPF, wraps, anything like that, they can take your business to the next level. And right now, they're offering free 15-minute phone consultations where you can schedule at the link in the description below. Tell them about your goals, tell them about your business, about yourself, and really where you want to get to, and they'll show you if they're online courses, they're in-person classes where I'll actually be in their August class, or they're one-on-one or group mentorship programs with Rich Light from Glossit. It's an awesome way to take your business to that next level. So set up your phone consultation now, talk to them about where you're at today, and they'll tell you where you could be tomorrow.